Welcome to an edition of Unsubscribe Short, where we spend 5 to 15, who knows how long, minutes talking about, in this case, a symposium that we ran internally, the Q3 SDR Symposium at Demand Drive, all about time management. Had a couple of takeaways from what our SDRs talked about in terms of how to best break up their day and categorize tasks and all that good stuff. I know you have a couple of takeaways as well. Let's regale our audience with some good insights and analysis on how we can help SDRs and salespeople in general just get a better hold of their day. So take it away. Start us off.
Yeah, for sure. And time management is the kind of topic that could cover so many different things for so many different people. Everyone needs to do it, right? Nobody's sitting there like, oh, I don't need to manage my time, right? But I think it was important to have this internal symposium really focused on the SDR role and how, especially for a lot of people who they're used to managing their time as they did in college or growing up or on the younger side of things, all of a sudden you hit the workforce, it's 40 hours a week. There's no such thing as homework. There's a lot of differences that I think can get lost in the shuffle. So it was really cool to be able to hear from some of the people that have joined the team and sort of perfected their own time management strategies over the course of their tenure in the role. One big takeaway I learned from that I thought was really interesting is one of the panelists talked about power hours, which are pretty synonymous with like you pick up the phone, you just keep calling for an hour. But talked about power hours for other things, maybe for account mapping, for maybe administrative stuff, changing up messaging, writing new email templates, whatever it sort of is. But treating that hour in a way that it's saying not, hey, I have an hour, let's be as productive as possible, as in like try to get as many leads as possible. It's, hey, I have an hour, let's be as productive as possible in whatever area I think I'm struggling. So, or it just needs a refresh, right? If it's once a quarter, at least you should probably have a power hour about messaging, changing up your email templates, and maybe A/B testing some things. But that's just an example. I think it's that the mindset is so important to this sort of thing, that it's not as much about like, some people do really well blocking off every single hour of their day for what they're supposed to do. Some people don't. And figuring out what works for you was a big part of this as well. But being able to at least sometimes take an hour, maybe even half an hour, and saying, this is what I need to get done. This is what I'm doing. I'm blocking up my calendar. I'm going off of Slack. I'm like turning that off for this hour so that I can focus on what I'm doing, was definitely one of the bigger takeaways that I thought was unique from an SDR perspective that is usually so focused on just picking up the phone and being productive that way.
Yeah. I also thought that was really interesting because you hear power hour, right? And you're right. Like you automatically assume it's in regards to doing outbound activity. But I think the biggest takeaway that I got from everyone's discussion points and from stuff that we've previously recorded and sort of produced around time management is still this idea that like it's twofold. It's one, that like you need to use evidence to create an efficient agenda for yourself. So understanding when you work best and when you're more likely to produce the outputs that you're expected to produce as an SDR, which are booked meetings and quality conversations, understanding when you're sort of best at doing that and building a schedule around that time that works for you. I think that's like the key to time management in general. And for a lot of reps, it was the experimentation, that's prong number 2, and understanding how to build habits over time that allowed them to focus on like, okay, between, 1 and 4 p.m. during my work days, that's when I'm the most focused and able to like sit down and make a ton of cold calls. Knowing that maybe between 9 and 10 a.m., I set aside an hour and do a power hour of account mapping to help prepare myself. And then between 10 and 11 a.m., I set up another power hour to do some administrative tasks, like making sure my Salesforce is clean, making sure that the CRM has the appropriate tasks loaded up into it, so that like when I have that 3-hour block where I'm calling, that's what I'm doing. And I don't have to worry about anything else around me. So it's like, that's what time management is, right? Like being able to focus on a specific task for a set period of time. But I think the biggest thing is like, it's not just going to immediately happen for everyone. You have to do the experimentation and have the time in the role to understand when you're best suited to do that task, and then build everything around that. That was sort of the biggest takeaway that I got from all of our panelists, were that they'd been doing this job for long enough to recognize like the patterns that allowed them to settle on those particular times for calling, those particular times for admin tasks, et cetera. And then worked around that rather than, I think a lot of people, they try different methodologies and it doesn't work for them. And they're like, time management is garbage and they just don't bother with it. So I thought that was the biggest takeaway for me, at least, was the evidence to create an efficient agenda.
Yeah. One question I did have about that section that they didn't touch on, though, and it's something I definitely ran into when I was an SDR, is what happens when that your best time for calling, maybe, you have just finished your coffee, your brain's the sharpest, you're ready to go, is not the best time to be calling your prospects. Like, what if your golden hour for calling prospects doesn't line up with your like ideal power hour for yourself?
I would say that's not your golden hour then. I think like it's twofold, right? Like you have to know that you're ready to do the job, but like you said, it doesn't matter if like your prospects aren't picking up. If I'm only calling into California and I'm raring to go and it's 9 o'clock in the morning, no one's picking up the phone at 6 a.m. So it's I think you have to marry both of those things. Like, when are my prospects most likely to engage with the messaging that I'm putting out? And when am I most able and alert to be able to do that? Sometimes they don't match and you just have to like, I don't know. I've restructured my day personally so many times to like force a habit into a time slot that makes more sense versus when I'm kind of like naturally inclined to do it. Almost like rewiring how you go about your day based on the external factors. I think for stuff like making sure that your prospects actually pick up the phone is crucial for that. But then you look at other external factors like, oh, this is typically when I have a team meeting, or this is typically when I'm on the floor with other reps and we're doing power hours together. Like, trying to work around stuff like that, I think, is almost secondary. Like, you should be able to communicate with your manager and your colleagues like, hey, I have to be calling between 1 and 4 p.m. every day because that just works best for my prospects and for my schedule, and get them to like work around that schedule, not be like totally inflexible, but flexible enough with it. But you only know that if you kind of keep at figuring out like, when is this the best time for me to do this? When are the best tactics for me to sort of implement some basic time management practices? When does that make sense for me? So it's a good question though. Like, likely a lot of people listening to this are like, I'd love to call at 10 a.m., but like no prospect picks up. So I guess I'm screwed. Like, not necessarily. You can rewire your brain a little bit to sort of better match up with when your prospects are actually going to respond to you.
Yeah. I like that as a response because in reality, we can talk about all the best practices we want, but nothing happens in a vacuum. There's context. Right. There's multiple pieces at play between your internal team, the people you're calling, yourself, your maybe desk mates if you're in an office. So yeah, being able to find that balance is another, not that it was talked about too much in the symposium, but just another aspect of it. There's a lot of good you can learn from and about your prospects and your teammates that help you with this time management. But yeah, you shouldn't be, I guess, getting in the way of somebody else's ability to manage their time as well. So, yeah, keep that balance. That's what it's all about.
Unsubscribe shorts, where they can be anywhere from realistically like 5 to 12 minutes.
Well, dude, this is a medium. YouTube does shorts. These are mediums. These are 5 to 15. Mid. We'll just call it mid. What could go wrong?
Meh. Unsubscribe. Meh.
Welcome to Unsubscribe Mediocre Edition, where we give you okay advice about things that might be important or not. We're not really sure.
We don't care.